Hey guys, tonight we're going to dive deep into the very heart of what it meant to be a Roman soldier. Not the glorious, sanitized version you often see in movies, but the raw, brutal truth. Imagine yourself standing there, a fresh recruit, feeling the coarse wool of your tunic against your skin, the dust of the drill ground caking your boots. You're young, maybe a little naive, with dreams of glory dancing in your head. But let me tell you, those dreams are about to be stomped into the dirt, quite literally. Roman warfare wasn't about heroic duels or chivalrous acts. It was about sheer, unadulterated survival, a grinding, relentless machine designed to break bodies and spirits. You'll be pushed to your limits, forced to confront the darkest aspects of human nature, and you'll quickly realize that you probably wouldn't survive a single day in their sandals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, if you're feeling brave, share your location and local time in the comments below. I'm curious to know where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived at the recruitment camp, a chaotic symphony of shouting officers, clanking armor, and the nervous murmur of hundreds of other hopefuls. The air hangs thick with the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and the distant metallic tang of an armorer's forge. You're just a number, another potential cog in the vast, unforgiving machine that is the Roman legion. Before you can even properly adjust, you're being herded like cattle, subjected to a quick, brutal inspection. They're not looking for charisma or a winning smile. They're looking for strength, for stamina, for a body that can endure unimaginable hardship. You feel a hand grip your arm, testing your biceps, another poking at your ribs. The legion wants solid bone and muscle, not flabby weakness. You might notice the veteran legionaries observing you, their faces etched with a peculiar mix of weariness and quiet judgment. Their eyes seem to see right through you, past your youthful bravado, to the fragile human beneath. They know what's coming, and they know most of you won't make it through. The very first lesson you learn, almost immediately, is discipline. It's not just a word, it's the air you breathe, the ground you walk on. You're taught to stand at attention for hours, unmoving, even as the sun beats down or the rain lashes against your face. Every muscle aches. Your legs tremble, but you dare not twitch. Disobeying an order, even a minor one, is met with swift, brutal punishment. You might see a fellow recruit, perhaps a bit too slow to respond or a bit too loud, being forced to carry extra weight during drills, or even subjected to a beating with a vine staff, known as a vitus. The sting of the vitus is legendary, designed to leave welts and bruises, a stark reminder that your individual will is now subservient to the legion's. This isn't about teaching you right from wrong in a moral sense. It's about breaking down your civilian self and rebuilding you as an obedient, unthinking instrument of war. Your physical training begins, and it's a relentless, soul-crushing ordeal. You spend hours, days, weeks running in full kit, weighed down by your armor and pack. Your lungs burn, your muscles scream, and you often feel like you might collapse, but you can't. The centurions, grizzled veterans with faces like carved stone, push you relentlessly. They shout, they curse, they mock your weakness. You learn to march for miles, carrying your heavy equipment, in all weathers, across all terrains. This isn't a casual stroll. It's a forced march designed to exhaust you to your core, to teach you that even when your body begs to quit, you must keep going. You're also taught to dig ditches, to build fortifications, to carry heavy timbers. Every waking moment is dedicated to transforming your soft civilian body into a hardened, efficient fighting machine. You quickly understand that the Romans didn't just win battles, they outmarched and outbuilt their enemies, turning every camp into a temporary fortress. Then comes the weapon training, and this is where the brutal reality truly sets in. You're handed a wooden sword, heavier and blunter than a real one, and a wicker shield. You learn the basic stances, the parries, the thrusts. The centurions demonstrate, their movements fluid and deadly, then expect you to replicate them perfectly, over and over again. You spar with other recruits, the dull thud of wood on wood echoing across the training ground. You're constantly corrected, often with a sharp rap from a centurion's stick if your form is sloppy. The goal isn't just to teach you to fight, it's to instill muscle memory, to make every movement instinctive, so that in the chaos of battle, your body reacts without conscious thought. You also learn to throw the pilum, the Roman javelin, a heavy, iron-tipped spear designed to pierce shields and pin enemies. You practice throwing it repeatedly, the weight of it straining your shoulder, until you can hurl it with accuracy and force. It's here you realize that a Roman soldier isn't just a fighter, he's a multi-talented killing machine. One particular, often overlooked aspect of Roman training was the simulated combat against a wooden post, known as the palace. You're given your heavy wooden sword and told to attack a sturdy wooden post, imagining it as an enemy. You thrust, parry, cut, and hack, developing your technique and building strength. This isn't just a simple exercise. It's designed to push you to exhaustion, to simulate the continuous effort required in real combat. You sweat, your muscles burn, and you might even tear a callus or two. The centurion watches, making sure you maintain proper form, even when fatigued. This repetitive, almost hypnotic training against the palace builds incredible endurance and precision, preparing you for the grueling prolonged nature of close-quarters combat. You'd learn to strike not just hard, but effectively, aiming for weak points and maintaining your guard. The psychological conditioning is just as intense as the physical. You're constantly reminded of the legion's glory, its invincibility, and the shame of cowardice. Stories of Roman triumphs are recounted, sometimes with exaggerated details, to instill a sense of pride and belonging. You're taught to view your fellow legionaries as brothers, your life dependent on theirs, and theirs on yours. This fosters an incredible bond, a camaraderie born from shared hardship and the knowledge that you will face death together. However, you also learn that the legion is unforgiving. Deserters are hunted down and executed, often publicly, as a stark warning. Cowardice in battle can lead to decimation, a terrifying punishment, where 1 in 10 men from a disgraced unit is beaten to death by his comrades. Historians still debate the true frequency of decimation, but the very threat of it was enough to instill absolute terror and ensure unwavering obedience. The fear of your own comrades can be a powerful motivator. You begin to understand the complex logistics of Roman warfare, something rarely depicted in popular culture. It's not just about fighting, it's about moving vast armies, feeding them, arming them, and supplying them. You're taught how to forage for food, how to repair your own equipment, how to construct temporary bridges, and even how to build roads. Every legionary is a multi-skilled engineer, a self-sufficient unit within a larger, self-sufficient army. You might find yourself tasked with digging latrines, collecting firewood, or fetching water for hundreds of men. This seemingly mundane work is crucial for the army's survival and efficiency. The Roman military machine was a marvel of organization, and you are just one small, replaceable part of that intricate system. You realize that a battle is often won or lost, not just on the battlefield, but in the meticulous planning and execution of supply lines and infrastructure. An odd, perhaps almost amusing, detail you might encounter during this training is the emphasis on personal hygiene, even in the harshest conditions. While you're living in mud and dust, you're still expected to maintain a certain level of cleanliness. You're taught to bathe in rivers when possible, and to meticulously clean your armor and weapons. There's a practical reason for this. Of course, preventing disease and ensuring your equipment functions properly, but there's also a psychological aspect, a way of maintaining order and discipline amidst the squalor of military life. You might find yourself scrubbing away grime with a mixture of ashes and oil, the ancient equivalent of soap, a strange ritual in a world defined by dirt and violence. It's a small, almost comforting routine in an otherwise brutal existence. A brief moment where you can reclaim a shred of personal dignity. As the weeks turn into months, you feel your body harden, your mind sharpen. The soft, civilian you begins to fade, replaced by a leaner, tougher, more resilient version. You're still scared. Of course, the thought of actual combat is terrifying. But now, that fear is tempered with a newfound confidence, a grim determination. You've learned to endure pain, to follow orders without question, and to rely on your comrades. You've been stripped of your individuality and reforged into a legionary, a member of the most formidable fighting force the ancient world had ever seen. You're ready as you'll ever be, to face the brutal truth of Roman warfare. The training has been a crucible, burning away your weakness and leaving behind something harder, something capable of surviving the unimaginable. The training never truly ends, but one day, the routine shifts. The drills become less about individual movements and more about unit cohesion. You're no longer just learning to swing a sword. You're learning to move as one with your contubernium, your 8-man tent group, and then as one with your century, your cohort, and finally, your entire legion. Imagine hundreds, then thousands, of men moving in perfect synchronicity, shields overlapping, swords ready. This isn't choreography for a parade. It's the deadly ballet of Roman warfare, where every man depends on the man next to him. You practice forming the testudo, the famous tortoise formation, where shields interlock on all sides, creating an armored shell against enemy projectiles. You learn to advance under a hail of arrows, your shoulders pressed against your comrades, trusting that their shield protects you as much as your own. The feeling of being part of such a disciplined, unified force is both terrifying and exhilarating. You realize that your individual strength is nothing compared to the collective might of the legion. Then comes the marching. Oh, the marching. You'd think it's just putting one foot in front of the other. But for a Roman legionary, it's an art form of endurance. You're expected to cover vast distances, sometimes 20 miles or more in a single day, often in full impedimenta, your marching pack. This pack is not light. You carry your armor, your weapons, a change of clothes, cooking utensils, rations for several days, a pickaxe or shovel, and even a small tent pole. The weight digs into your shoulders, chafes against your skin, and every step becomes a conscious effort. You learn to ignore the burning in your calves, the ache in your lower back, and the constant threat of blisters. The centurions march alongside you, sometimes even faster, setting a relentless pace. They're looking for any sign of weakness, any lagging. Because in a real campaign, a slow march can mean the difference between victory and annihilation. As you march, you're not just passively covering ground. You're constantly aware of your surroundings, trained to observe the terrain, to spot potential ambushes, to note the availability of water. Roman legions were masters of logistical awareness. You might be instructed to identify suitable camping spots, to estimate distances, or to assess the local resources. This keen observational skill, honed over countless marches, turned every legionary into a rudimentary scout and an essential part of the army's intelligence gathering. You're always learning, always absorbing information, because every detail could mean the difference between life and death for you and your brothers. The landscape isn't just scenery, it's a tactical puzzle waiting to be solved. At the end of a long day's march, when your body is screaming for rest, the real work often begins building the camp. This isn't just pitching a few tents, this is constructing a fortified temporary city, sometimes in a matter of hours. Every legionary has a specific role. You might be part of the advance party, digging the perimeter ditch, or perhaps felling trees for the vallum, the earth and timber rampart. the rhythmic thud of shovels hitting earth, the clang of axes on wood, and the shouts of centurions directing the effort fill the twilight air. You work until your hands are raw, your back is aching, and your eyelids feel heavy. The camp is laid out with precision, roads intersecting at right angles, tents arranged in neat rows, with clear areas for the commander's tent, the hospital, and the supply depot. This systematic approach isn't just about order, it's about efficiency and security. A well-built camp could withstand a surprise attack, providing a much-needed respite for the weary legionaries. The fortifications you build are impressive, even for temporary structures. The fossa, or ditch, could be several feet deep and wide, often with sharpened stakes at the bottom. The vallum would rise behind it, a formidable wall of earth reinforced with timber and topped with palisades. You, as a legionary, are directly involved in this construction. You learn to dig, to cut, to carry, to build. It's hard, backbreaking labor, but there's a sense of pride in seeing the camp rise around you, a tangible testament to the Legion's incredible engineering capabilities. An interesting detail is that a Roman marching camp, even for a single night, would often be built to a standardized plan, a testament to their obsession with order and efficiency. This wasn't just practical, it was also a psychological weapon, demonstrating to any local tribes or enemies the sheer organizational power of Rome. Imagine being an enemy scout, seeing a fully fortified camp spring up seemingly out of nowhere, perfectly laid out, a clear signal of Rome's unwavering determination. Inside the camp, life is austere but organized. You sleep in a leather tent, sharing cramped quarters with your contubernium. There's a constant low hum of activity, the sharpening of blades, the murmuring of conversations, the clatter of cooking pots. You learn to cook your own meager rations, often hardtack, dried meat, and some grain. It's not gourmet dining, but it's enough to fuel your exhausted body for another day of marching and fighting. You learn to mend your own clothes, to clean your own armor, to be self-sufficient in every way. There's a strict hierarchy, of course, from the lowliest legionary to the mighty legatus, the commander of the legion. You learn to respect this hierarchy, understanding that discipline and obedience are paramount to the survival of the unit. Even during these arduous marches and camp-building exercises, there's always a period for drills and inspections. You might have just spent 10 hours marching, only to be told to fall into formation for an hour of weapon practice. Your centurion will inspect your gear, making sure your armor is clean, your pilum is sharp, and your gladius is free of rust. Any shortcomings are met with immediate, often public, reprimand. This constant pressure, this relentless pursuit of perfection, is designed to ensure that even when exhausted, every legionary maintains peak readiness. It's a subtle but effective form of control, preventing complacency from ever setting in. One historical point that often gets overlooked is the role of Roman engineers within the legion. While every legionary was expected to be a capable builder, specialized engineers, the architecti, were crucial for more complex constructions like bridges, siege engines, and advanced fortifications. They were the masterminds behind the rapid deployment of Roman infrastructure, allowing armies to cross rivers, breach walls, and establish permanent bases with astonishing speed. Historians still debate the exact level of technical training provided to every legionary versus the specialized knowledge held by these dedicated engineers. But it's clear that the synergy between the two was a key factor in Rome's military dominance. You, as a common legionary, might not fully understand the complex calculations of a bridge, but you'd certainly be tasked with carrying the heavy timber or digging the foundations under their meticulous supervision. The camaraderie that develops during these marches and camp constructions is deep and enduring. You sweat together, you curse together, and you rely on each other. You share stories, jokes, and sometimes quiet fears. You see the raw humanity in your comrades, their strengths and their weaknesses, and you learn to trust them with your life. This bond, forged in the crucible of shared hardship, is what truly holds the Legion together. It's a silent understanding that when the real fighting begins, the man next to you will stand firm, just as you will for him. You're not just soldiers, you're a family, albeit a very brutal and disciplined one. And as the sun sets over another meticulously constructed camp, you drift off to sleep, knowing that tomorrow the march will continue, and the brutal truth of Roman life will reveal another layer. You've marched for weeks, perhaps months, your body a finely tuned instrument of endurance. The camps, once a nightly chore, now feel like second nature to build. But all this training, all this relentless conditioning, has been leading to one thing: the tools of the trade. These aren't just objects, they are extensions of your will, your very survival hinging on your mastery of them. The first and most iconic is the gladius, your short stabbing sword. You've practiced with a wooden one, but now you feel the cool, unforgiving weight of steel in your hand. It's not designed for fancy dueling, but for brutal, efficient thrusts into an enemy's soft parts. You're taught to aim for the gut, the groin, the throat, anywhere a quick, decisive blow can put an opponent down. The gladius is a close-quarters weapon, meant to be used in the tightly packed formations where Roman legions excelled. You grip the hilt, feeling the slight roughness of the wood or bone, and you know this blade is your life. Alongside your gladius is your scutum, the large rectangular shield. It's not just a defensive tool, it's an offensive weapon, made of layers of wood, leather, and linen, reinforced with a metal boss in the center. It's heavy, perhaps around 15 to 20 pounds. You learn to hold it, not just to block, but to push, to shove, to create openings in the enemy line. Imagine holding this massive piece of protection, feeling its weight, knowing that it's the primary barrier between you and a charging barbarian's axe. You learn to press your scutum against your comrades, forming an impenetrable wall, a human battering ram. The way the Roman legion fought relied heavily on this shield wall, advancing inexorably, step by painful step, pushing the enemy back, then using the gladius in the tight space created. You'd paint your scutum with your legion's emblem, a symbol of identity and fierce pride. Even though in the heat of battle, it would quickly become scuffed and blood-splattered. Then there's the pilum, the Roman javelin. This isn't just a spear, it's an ingenious piece of engineering designed to render enemy shields useless. It has a long, slender iron shank, often unhardened, attached to a wooden shaft. When thrown, the unhardened iron would bend on impact, preventing the enemy from throwing it back. It also had a small pyramid-shaped head designed to pierce armor and flesh. You're taught to hurl your pilum just before engaging the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. Imagine the scene: thousands of pila raining down on an approaching foe, each one a death sentence, or at least a debilitating injury, forcing them to drop their shields or be hampered by a bent javelin sticking out of them. It's a terrifyingly effective opening move, designed to sow chaos and create vulnerabilities before you even close with the enemy. You'd carry 2 pila, sometimes one heavy and one lighter, giving you options depending on the situation. Your armor, while offering protection, is also a constant burden. The most common was the larica segmentata, segments of iron plates held together by leather straps and buckles. It's surprisingly flexible, allowing for movement, but it's heavy and hot. You feel its weight on your shoulders, the constant pressure of the metal, the way it traps sweat against your skin. In the scorching heat of a summer campaign, it feels like an oven. In the biting cold of winter, it offers little warmth. You also have a helmet, the galea, often with cheek guards that protect your face but limit your peripheral vision. The world shrinks to a narrow slit as you peer out from beneath the brim, focusing only on what's directly in front of you. This equipment is designed for survival, not comfort, and every piece of it contributes to the relentless grind of a legionary's life. Beyond the primary weapons, you carry an assortment of smaller, crucial items. A dagger, the pugio, is always at your side, a last resort weapon for close quarters fighting or for dispatching a wounded foe. You also carry various tools, a small shovel for digging, a sickle for foraging, and perhaps even a water skin made of animal hide. Every item in your pack has a purpose. Every ounce of weight is justified. You quickly learn to discard anything non-essential, for every extra pound means more fatigue on the march. An intriguing detail many people miss is the multifunctionality of many Roman tools. For example, the delabra, a pickaxe, could be used for digging fortifications, clearing brush, or even as an improvised weapon. The Roman army was a master of efficiency, where every piece of equipment served multiple purposes, a testament to their practical approach to warfare. The maintenance of these tools is a daily ritual. You're taught to clean and sharpen your gladius every evening, to inspect your scutum for damage, and to oil your armor to prevent rust. Your centurion will often inspect your gear, and a poorly maintained weapon or rusted armor is a serious offense. This isn't just about military discipline, it's about survival. A dull blade can get you killed. A damaged shield can leave you exposed. You learn to cherish your equipment, to treat it with respect, for it is your lifeline in a world designed to kill you. The methodical routine of cleaning and inspecting your gear also serves as a quiet, meditative moment, a brief respite from the constant demands of legionary life, a chance to connect with the instruments that will keep you alive. You also learn the psychology of weapons. The Romans understood that the mere sight of their disciplined legions, armed with their formidable weapons, could be enough to break an enemy's will. The gleaming scuta, the rows of pila held ready, the glint of gladii, all contributed to an image of overwhelming power. You are part of this psychological warfare. You are taught to hold your head high, to move with purpose, to project an aura of invincibility. You are an embodiment of Rome's might, and your weapons are the tangible proof of that power. Historians still debate the optimal length and weight of the gladius used by different legions and during different periods, suggesting a certain flexibility and adaptation based on enemy types and fighting styles. While the basic design remained consistent, variations in blade length and hilt design indicate that Roman blacksmiths and commanders were constantly refining their instruments of war. You, as a legionary, might not be privy to these high-level discussions, but you would certainly feel the subtle differences if you were issued a gladius from a different forge or an older campaign. This constant evolution reflects Rome's pragmatic approach to warfare. If something could be improved, it would be, you've held these weapons. You've trained with them until your hands ached and your muscles burned. You know their weight, their balance, their deadly purpose. They are no longer just metal and wood. They are an extension of your body, forged in the fires of discipline and honed by endless repetition. You are a Roman legionary, and you are ready to wield the brutal truth of these tools, to unleash their power upon any who dare to stand against the might of Rome. The quiet hum of the night in camp is punctuated by the occasional clink of metal as a comrade perhaps adjusts his armor, or the soft rasp of a sharpening stone, constant reminders of what awaits. All the marching, the camp building, the endless drills with the gladius and scutum, it all funnels down to this, the brutality of battle. You might have imagined heroic charges, clear lines, and decisive blows. The reality is far grittier. A chaotic maelstrom of noise, fear, and instinct. You're standing shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, your scutum pressed tight against theirs, forming that impenetrable wall you've practiced countless times. The air crackles with tension, a palpable buzz of anticipation and dread. You can hear the distant war cries of the enemy, growing louder, more menacing with every passing moment. The smell of fear, both your own and that of the men around you, hangs heavy in the air. Suddenly, the order comes. It might be a trumpet blast, a shouted command, or simply the centurion's roar. You step forward. A relentless, unified advance. The ground trembles beneath your feet as thousands of men move as one. The enemy charges, a wave of raw, unbridled aggression. Their forms, once distant blurs, now resolve into individual faces contorted by rage or terror. Then, the first clash. It's not a graceful dance, it's a collision, a brutal impact of flesh and steel. The sound is deafening, the sickening thud of bodies, the clang of weapons, the screams of the wounded. You are in it, fully immersed in the terrifying symphony of close-quarters combat. Your training kicks in, overriding the primal fear that threatens to paralyze you. Your scutum becomes an extension of your arm, blocking a wild swing from an enemy axe. You push forward, using the weight of your shield to unbalance your opponent. Then, with a practiced, brutal thrust, your gladius finds its mark. It's not clean. It's not glorious. It's a desperate, messy struggle for survival. You see the shock, then the fading light in your opponent's eyes. There's no time to dwell, no time for regret. Another enemy is instantly upon you, and the fight continues. A blur of parries, thrusts, and desperate lunges. The battle itself is a sensory overload. The stench of blood and sweat quickly fills the air, mingling with the acrid smell of fear and the metallic tang of iron. The ground becomes slick with mud and gore, making every step treacherous. You're constantly aware of the men around you, fighting alongside them, relying on their shields, protecting their flanks. A Roman legionary fights as part of a unit, a cohesive block of steel and determination. If one man falls, another immediately steps into his place, maintaining the integrity of the line. There's no room for individual heroism in the Roman battle line. Only disciplined. Collective action matters. You might find yourself locked in a desperate struggle, your breath ragged, your muscles burning, your helmet feeling impossibly heavy. The noise is constant, the shouts of commanders, the cries of pain, the relentless rhythm of steel on steel. Your vision narrows, focusing only on the immediate threat. Time seems to stretch and distort, moments feeling like hours. Hours passing in an instant. You fight with a primal ferocity, driven by adrenaline and the sheer will to survive. The training, the relentless repetition of drills, now proves its worth. Your body reacts instinctively, executing the thrusts and blocks that have been hammered into your muscle memory. During the chaos, a particular, often unsettling, common historical occurrence was the Roman practice of a second line of legionaries advancing through the first line. As the front rank became fatigued or gaps appeared, the second rank would seamlessly move forward, maintaining the pressure on the enemy and ensuring the Roman line remained unbroken. This requires an incredible level of discipline and coordination, especially under the extreme duress of combat. You would literally be pushed forward by the men behind you, and in turn, you would be pushing the enemy back. A relentless, grinding advance that slowly but surely broke the spirit and formations of Rome's adversaries. The Roman approach to battle was methodical, almost like a meat grinder. It wasn't about quick, flashy victories, but about sustained pressure, about slowly eroding the enemy's will to fight. You would engage, push, hold, and push again. The pilum volley had softened them up, the scutum wall was pushing them back, and your gladius was doing the brutal work up close. It was exhausting, terrifying, and utterly dehumanizing. You might step over fallen comrades, or over the bodies of enemies, barely registering their presence as you focus on the next threat. Historians still debate the precise psychological impact of the Roman battle formation, particularly the interlocked shield approach, on both Roman soldiers and their enemies. Some argue it created an unparalleled sense of security and unity for the legionaries, while terrifying opponents who faced an unyielding wall of steel. Others suggest it limited individual initiative and could be vulnerable if flanks were exposed. However, you, as a legionary, wouldn't be concerned with such academic debates. You would simply be living the brutal reality of it, trusting the man next to you with your life. The battle might last for hours, or it might be over in a blinding flash of violence. When the enemy finally breaks, when their lines shatter and they flee, a different kind of chaos ensues. The disciplined advance turns into a relentless pursuit. You chase the fleeing enemy, cutting them down as they run, showing no mercy. This is not about vengeance. It's about breaking their will to ever fight Rome again, ensuring a decisive victory. The pursuit can be just as exhausting and dangerous as the initial clash, with scattered pockets of resistance and desperate counterattacks. As the sounds of battle fade, replaced by the groans of the wounded and the distant shouts of commanders, you finally get a moment to breathe. Your armor feels heavier than ever, sweat stinging your eyes. Your hands tremble, and your heart pounds a frantic rhythm in your chest. You look around at the battlefield, a scene of utter devastation. Bodies are strewn everywhere, twisted into unnatural shapes, their faces frozen in expressions of agony or terror. The ground is churned up, stained dark with blood. The reality of what you've just done, what you've just survived, washes over you. This is the brutal truth of Roman warfare, stripped of any glory or romanticism. The initial clash is over. The enemy's lines are broken, and the pursuit is winding down. You stand amidst the carnage, your body screaming for rest, your mind still reeling from the sensory assault. But for a Roman legionary, the fight isn't always a direct, face-to-face confrontation in an open field. Sometimes, the enemy retreats behind walls, into fortified cities, or onto unassailable heights. This is when you enter the terrifying, protracted world of siege warfare. This isn't about quick, decisive action. It's about a grinding, slow death for either you or the besieged. A war of attrition where patience and engineering are as deadly as any sword. Imagine being tasked with building a circumvallation, a massive ring of fortifications completely encircling an enemy city. You're not just building a camp anymore. You're constructing a double wall. Ditches, watchtowers, and even temporary roads to move supplies and siege engines. You spend weeks, perhaps months, digging, cutting timber, and hauling stone. Your pickaxe becomes an extension of your arm, your shovel a constant companion. The enemy inside watches from their walls, occasionally launching projectiles, adding a constant low-level threat to your already back-breaking work. The ground around the city becomes a labyrinth of trenches and earthworks, all designed to starve out the enemy and prevent any relief forces from reaching them. You're building their tomb, one spadeful of dirt at a time, or perhaps you're part of the team responsible for building siege engines. The sheer scale of these machines is astonishing. You might be helping to construct a massive ballista, a giant crossbow capable of launching enormous bolts or stones with incredible force, designed to smash through walls or fortifications. The creaking of the winches, the groans of the timber as it's put under immense stress, the constant shouts of the engineers directing the construction. It's a symphony of destructive power. Or you could be working on a catapult, a massive sling designed to hurl heavy stones, sometimes even diseased carcasses, over enemy walls, spreading terror and pestilence. The sheer ingenuity of Roman engineering is on full display here, turning raw materials into instruments of overwhelming force. One of the most terrifying aspects of siege warfare for the attacker is the sapper's work digging tunnels beneath enemy walls. You're crammed into a dark, claustrophobic tunnel, the air thick with dust and the smell of damp earth. The only sounds are the rhythmic scrape of your pickaxe against rock and the muffled voices of your comrades. You know that, at any moment, the tunnel could collapse, burying you alive, or the enemy could dig a counter-tunnel and flood your passage with smoke, or even molten lead. It's a job for the truly brave, or the truly desperate. The goal is to undermine the enemy's walls, causing them to collapse, or to create a surprise entry point into the city. An interesting detail is that Roman sappers often used the fire and water method to weaken rock, heating it with fires then rapidly cooling it with water to cause it to crack, making excavation easier. This demonstrates their practical scientific understanding even in the midst of brutal warfare. Then there are the siege towers, colossal wooden structures wheeled up to the enemy walls. Imagine pushing one of these enormous, multi-storied contraptions forward, feeling the immense weight of it, knowing that enemy projectiles are raining down on you from above. As you approach the wall, you hear the thud of rocks hitting the timber, the whistle of arrows, and the shouts of the defenders. Once in place, the drawbridge at the top of the tower is lowered, and you, along with your comrades, storm across, engaging the desperate defenders in a brutal, hand-to-hand fight on the ramparts. It's a terrifying, high-stakes assault, a desperate gamble for a swift end to the siege. Life during a siege is a test of endurance, unlike any other. You're constantly on edge, subjected to the occasional sally from the besieged or the constant threat of projectiles. Rations become meager, disease can sweep through the camp, and boredom often sets in, punctuated by moments of intense terror. The psychological toll is immense. You watch as the enemy inside the city slowly starves, their desperation growing with each passing day. You might hear their cries, see their emaciated figures on the walls, and a strange mix of pity and grim satisfaction might wash over you. This isn't just about defeating an army, it's about breaking a society. Historians still debate the ethical implications of certain Roman siege tactics, particularly the use of starvation and the common practice of enslaving or massacring the defeated population after a successful siege. While it was standard practice for the era, it highlights the brutal, uncompromising nature of Roman conquest. You, as a legionary, wouldn't likely ponder such ethical dilemmas. Your focus would be on following orders, surviving, and achieving victory for Rome, no matter the cost to the enemy. The eventual breach of the walls, or the surrender of the city, marks not an end to the brutality, but a shift. If the city resisted fiercely, the Romans often permitted a period of unrestrained plunder and slaughter for a short time. As a reward for the legionaries and a terrifying lesson to others, you would be part of this terrifying aftermath, witnessing scenes of unimaginable horror, or participating in them yourself. The shouts of triumph mingle with the screams of the dying. The glint of gladii reflects in pools of blood, and the air is thick with the smell of smoke and death. This is the ultimate, brutal consequence of defying Rome, a terrifying illustration of the price of conquest. Even if you didn't actively participate in the worst of the carnage, the sights and sounds would be etched into your memory. The looting, the destruction, the despair of the conquered. It's a stark reminder that Roman victory often came at an immense human cost, a cost paid not just by the enemy, but by the souls of the legionaries who carried out these brutal orders. The experience of a siege, prolonged and utterly destructive, would leave an indelible mark on you, making you question, perhaps quietly to yourself, the true meaning of glory. The dust of the besieged city settles. The screams subside, and the echoes of battle fade. You might think, finally, peace. But for a Roman legionary, life after the carnage isn't a return to normalcy. It's a transition to a different kind of brutal reality. You are alive. Yes. But the battlefield leaves its indelible marks. Not just on the bodies of the fallen, but on the minds and souls of those who survive. The immediate aftermath is a grim routine of consolidation, salvage, and the grim tally of victory and loss. First, there's the cleanup. Imagine the stench. The battlefield is a charnel house, filled with the dead and dying. You might be tasked with collecting the bodies of your fallen comrades, preparing them for burial or cremation. This is a somber, silent duty, a stark reminder of the fragile line between life and death that you just walked. You see their faces, perhaps men you shared a tent with, men you trusted with your life, now lifeless and broken. The casual brutality of combat is replaced by the solemnity of death. You might also be involved in stripping the dead enemies of their armor and weapons, a practical act of resource recovery. It's a grim, necessary task, but one that highlights the dehumanizing nature of constant warfare. Then comes the looting and plunder, if permitted. This is where the grim reward for your brutal efforts comes in. You might find coins, jewelry, fine fabrics, or even livestock. The chaos of battle transforms into a scramble for spoils, a chance to gain some material wealth after risking your life. However, this isn't always orderly. You might witness arguments, even fights, breaking out over choice items. It's a moment where discipline can fray, where the base instincts of greed can emerge. Sometimes, the spoils are collected and distributed by the Legion's command, ensuring a more equitable share. But the initial free-for-all could be chaotic. This aspect of post-battle life, while offering some tangible reward, also exposes the raw, uncivilized underbelly of conquest. The wounded are tended to, often in makeshift field hospitals. You might see men with horrific injuries, mangled limbs, deep gashes, shattered bones. Roman medicine, while advanced for its time, was still brutally basic. Surgeons would amputate limbs without anesthesia, cauterize wounds with hot irons, and pray to the gods for recovery. You might be asked to assist, holding down a screaming comrade or fetching water for the medics. The sounds of pain, the sight of suffering, become a constant backdrop. You realize that surviving the initial clash is only the first hurdle. Recovery from a serious wound is a battle in itself, and many do not win it. This constant exposure to severe injury normalizes suffering, hardening you further. Even in the relative calm after a battle, the threat of disease is ever present. With thousands of men concentrated in one area, often with poor sanitation and contaminated water, epidemics can sweep through a camp like wildfire. Dysentery, typhoid, and various fevers could claim more lives than the enemy's swords. You live in a constant state of mild discomfort, often battling minor ailments, knowing that a serious sickness could fell you just as easily as a barbarian's axe. The Roman army, despite its organizational prowess, struggled greatly with disease, which was arguably a greater killer than combat itself. The psychological toll begins to manifest. The adrenaline that surged through your veins during the fight slowly recedes, leaving behind a profound exhaustion, both physical and mental. You might find yourself replaying moments of the battle in your mind, the faces of enemies, the cries of the dying. Sleep might be elusive, haunted by nightmares. You might become jumpy, easily startled by sudden noises. The constant exposure to violence, death, and extreme stress reshapes your worldview. You become cynical, perhaps, or emotionally numb, a coping mechanism to deal with the horrors you've witnessed and participated in. Historians still debate the specific terminology and prevalence of what we now call PTSD in Roman soldiers. But it's clear from ancient accounts and medical texts that Roman veterans suffered from various forms of psychological distress and trauma. The lack of formal psychological support meant these wounds often festered unseen. You might engage in brief moments of camaraderie with your fellow survivors, sharing a flask of wine or a quiet conversation around a small fire. These are moments of shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of what you've all just endured. You cling to these bonds, for they are the only things that truly keep you grounded in this brutal existence. The men around you are the only ones who truly understand what you've seen, what you've done, and what you've become. The practicalities of governance and occupation also begin. If a city was taken, you might be assigned guard duty, patrolling the devastated streets, keeping order amongst a terrified, conquered populace. You might see the beginning of Roman administration being established, taxes being levied, and new laws being enforced. You are not just a soldier. You are an instrument of Roman rule, enforcing the new order with the unspoken threat of your gladius. This is the mundane, yet essential, work of empire building, the consolidation of conquest. An unusual detail of the immediate aftermath of a battle could involve the treatment of enemy prisoners. While some might be executed, others could be enslaved, often destined for the mines or agricultural estates. You might see columns of defeated, bound enemies being marched away, their fate sealed. This was a grim part of Roman warfare, the systematic exploitation of the conquered. It was a stark visual reminder of the total victory Rome expected and the complete subjugation it imposed. As the days turn into weeks after the battle, the memory of the immediate carnage might begin to dull, replaced by the mundane routine of army life. But the psychological scars, the hardening of your spirit, and the quiet understanding of what you are now capable of, those linger. You are no longer the same person who joined the legion. You are a survivor, tempered by fire and blood, forever changed by the brutal truth of Roman warfare. The distant cries of night animals, or the crackling of a nearby campfire, might momentarily bring back the sounds of the battlefield, a subtle reminder that the horror is never truly far away. The immediate aftermath of battle, with its grim cleanup and raw emotions, slowly gives way to the more systematic process of the spoils of war. For the Roman legionary, this wasn't just about personal loot. It was a fundamental aspect of Roman conquest, a tangible reward for risk and suffering, and a significant economic driver for the Republic and later the Empire. When the dust truly settles and the enemy is broken, you find yourself amidst the remnants of their world. And it's time to assess the gains. Imagine walking through a conquered city or over a recently abandoned battlefield. The first priority is often collecting and securing valuable metals. Gold and silver, whether in coin, jewelry, or raw form, are meticulously gathered. You might be part of a detail sifting through rubble, or even excavating enemy treasuries. The glint of gold amidst the debris is a powerful motivator, a stark contrast to the blood and grime of battle. These precious metals are often melted down and minted into Roman coinage, literally turning enemy wealth into instruments of Roman power. This systematic collection ensured that a significant portion of the wealth flowed back to Rome, funding further campaigns and enriching the state. Beyond precious metals, goods and resources are systematically cataloged and taken. This could include vast quantities of grain, livestock, timber, and even finished goods like pottery, textiles, and tools. You might be involved in herding captured animals, loading carts with sacks of grain, or dismantling enemy siege engines for their useful timber. This process highlights the practical, almost industrial scale of Roman conquest. They didn't just conquer territory, they absorbed its resources, integrating them into their vast logistical machine. The sight of long convoys of wagons, laden with enemy wealth, snaking their way back to Roman strongholds, is a common scene after a major victory. Perhaps the most significant and chilling spoil of Roman warfare was the capture of people for slavery. If a city resisted fiercely, its inhabitants, especially the adult males, could be sold into slavery. You would see columns of chained captives being marched away, their faces etched with despair. Women and children were often taken as well, destined for domestic service, agriculture, or worse. This was a brutal but common practice in the ancient world, and the Roman system relied heavily on slave labor for everything from mining and farming to constructing grand public works. Historians still debate the precise proportion of the Roman population that was enslaved at any given time, but it's clear that successful military campaigns were a major source of this human commodity. You, as a legionary, would be desensitized to this, seeing it as a natural consequence of war, a grim but accepted part of victory. The strategic significance of captured land is also immense. Conquered territories become new Roman provinces, opening up new tax revenues, new resources, and new strategic bases. You might be part of the garrison force left behind to pacify a newly conquered region, building roads, establishing Roman law, and collecting tribute. This isn't immediate spoils, but it's the long-term wealth of empire, fueled by the initial conquest. The very ground you stood on, stained with blood, now becomes part of the growing Roman domain. a testament to the effectiveness of your gladius and scutum. You might also encounter enemy military equipment and weapons. These aren't always kept. Sometimes, they are systematically destroyed to prevent the enemy from rearming. However, captured standards and important enemy arms would often be taken as trophies, displayed in triumphal processions back in Rome. Imagine seeing the tattered banners of a defeated foe paraded through the Forum, a visual reminder of Rome's military supremacy. For you, the common legionary, perhaps your reward is a piece of enemy armor or a unique weapon, a tangible souvenir of your survival and the battle you fought. The distribution of spoils varied. Sometimes, there would be a public auction of captured goods, with the proceeds going to the state treasury and a portion distributed to the soldiers as prize money. Other times, individual soldiers were allowed a certain amount of personal plunder from the battlefield or captured settlements. This prize money, or praeta, could be a substantial sum, enough to buy land back home, support a family, or even pay off debts. It was a powerful incentive for soldiers to fight bravely and contribute to the legion's success. This system directly linked your personal gain to the overall victory of the legion, reinforcing discipline and aggression. An interesting, almost humorous, detail regarding spoils is the occasional discovery of truly bizarre or unexpected items. While most spoils were practical, sometimes exotic animals, unique artworks, or strange religious artifacts were captured and sent back to Rome, often baffling the common soldier who just wanted something useful or valuable. You might stumble upon a bizarre statue or a cage of strange birds, wondering what possible use the generals would have for them. These oddities served as reminders of the vast and varied world that Rome was slowly engulfing, and the diverse cultures it was subjugating. The process of managing spoils, from collection to distribution, was a massive logistical undertaking, requiring significant organization and oversight. It was another facet of the Roman military machine's efficiency, turning the brutal act of war into a profitable enterprise. For you, the legionary, the spoils of war represent more than just material gain. They are a validation of your suffering, a tangible sign that your efforts were not in vain, and a grim promise of a better future, if you survive to claim it. As you pack away your meager share, the quiet satisfaction of possessing something taken from the enemy mingles with the ever-present ache of exhaustion. You've survived the training, endured the brutal marches, faced the terror of battle, and even participated in the grim harvest of spoils. But as a Roman legionary, you quickly learn that victory, while sweet, comes with a profound and often unseen cost not just to you, but to the very people and lands that Rome conquers. This is the price of conquest, a brutal truth that underlies the grand narratives of Roman expansion. You are an instrument of this price, an enforcer of Rome's will, and you witness its effects firsthand. Imagine being stationed in a newly conquered province. The initial terror and chaos of the invasion might have subsided, but now you see the slow, grinding imposition of Roman rule. The local populace, once free, now lives under the shadow of your legion. You might be part of patrols, enforcing new laws, or collecting taxes. You see the resentment in their eyes, the quiet defiance, or the broken spirit of those who have lost everything. Their farmlands, once theirs, might now be Roman property, or subject to heavy tribute. Their traditions and customs are slowly eroded by the pervasive influence of Roman culture. This isn't a quick, dramatic event, but a slow, suffocating squeeze. The economic exploitation of conquered territories is immediately apparent. Rome demanded tribute, often in the form of grain, precious metals, or raw materials, which were then shipped back to the heart of the empire. You might be tasked with overseeing the collection of these resources, watching as local farmers struggle to meet quotas, or as miners toil under Roman supervision. This extraction of wealth enriched Rome immensely, fueling its growth and prosperity. but it often impoverished the conquered peoples, stripping them of their resources and stifling their own economic development. You see firsthand how the bread on your table, or the coin in your purse, is ultimately paid for by the toil and suffering of others. The cultural suppression is also a quiet, insidious price. While Rome often adopted aspects of conquered cultures, it also imposed its own. Latin becomes the language of administration and law. Roman gods are introduced, sometimes alongside, sometimes in place of local deities. Roman architecture, roads, and cities begin to appear, transforming the landscape. You might see ancient temples slowly falling into disrepair as new Roman altars are built. It's a slow erosion of identity, a gradual subsuming of diverse cultures into the monolithic Roman way of life. For the conquered, their unique heritage is slowly, systematically dismantled. For many of the conquered, the price of conquest was also slavery. As you've seen during the spoils of war, defeated populations could be rounded up and sold. But beyond the battlefield captures, the ongoing process of Roman rule could lead to further enslavement. Debt, rebellion, or simply being born into a family of slaves meant a life of forced labor for countless individuals. You might guard slave gangs working in mines or on vast Roman estates, seeing the endless, dehumanizing toil. This human cost, the sheer number of lives reduced to property, is a profound and often overlooked aspect of Roman expansion. An interesting but disturbing detail is that entire cities were sometimes depopulated and their inhabitants sold into slavery as a deterrent to future rebellions, illustrating the ruthless logic of Roman power. The constant threat of rebellion is another part of the price. Conquered peoples did not always accept Roman rule passively. You might find yourself deployed to put down local uprisings, to crush desperate acts of defiance. These rebellions are often brutally suppressed, with Roman legions demonstrating their unwavering resolve through mass executions, crucifixions, and further enslavement. This cycle of conquest, oppression, and rebellion creates a perpetual state of tension, a constant undercurrent of violence just beneath the surface of apparent peace. You are the one who has to face this resentment, the one who has to enforce the brutal peace. Historians still debate the extent to which Roman rule ultimately benefited or harmed the conquered populations. Some argue that Roman infrastructure, law, and stability brought order and prosperity in the long run, leading to the Romanization of many regions. Others emphasize the initial brutality, the economic exploitation, and the loss of indigenous cultures. You, as a legionary on the ground, wouldn't be engaged in this complex debate. You would simply see the immediate, undeniable consequences, the subjugation, the hardship, and the quiet suffering of those who now lived under Rome's shadow. Even the very act of building infrastructure, while seemingly beneficial, comes at a cost to the conquered. Roads, bridges, and aqueducts, while vital for Roman control and trade, are often built using the forced labor of local populations. You might oversee the construction projects, ensuring that the work is done quickly and efficiently, even as the local workers toil under harsh conditions, their own lives and livelihoods disrupted for Rome's benefit. These grand monuments to Roman engineering are often built on the backs of the conquered. You come to understand that Rome's glory is built on the suffering of countless others. The triumphal arches, the grand public buildings, the lavish lifestyles of the Roman elite all are ultimately funded by the exploitation and subjugation of those whom you, the legionary, have helped to conquer. The price of conquest is not just paid in blood on the battlefield. It is paid in stolen resources, lost freedoms, and the quiet despair of generations who live under the heel of an indifferent empire. As you stand guard in a newly acquired town, watching the sun set over a landscape that is now undeniably Roman, you feel the weight of this truth. You've served your time, endured the brutal training, survived the horrors of battle, witnessed the spoils, and become an enforcer of Rome's relentless conquest. Years have passed since you first strapped on a gladius and marched with the legion. Now, the day finally arrives your discharge. This isn't a joyous, unburdened return. It's the veteran's return. A complex transition from a life of absolute discipline and constant threat to a world that feels both familiar and utterly alien. You are no longer just a soldier. You are a veteraness, carrying the physical scars and, more profoundly, the indelible mental imprints of your service. Imagine the journey home. You might travel with other discharged comrades, a small band of hardened men, sharing stories and grim jokes. The weight of your pack feels different now, no longer a burden of impending battle, but a collection of meager possessions and the memories of a life left behind. As you get closer to your home region, the sights and sounds of civilian life begin to filter in the laughter of children, the chatter of merchants, the quiet rhythm of farming. These are things you once knew, but they now feel distant, almost unreal. After years steeped in the brutal realities of war, one of the most significant aspects of your return is the donative, a payment of land or money from the state. This was Rome's way of rewarding its loyal soldiers and providing them with a means to establish themselves in civilian life. You might receive a plot of land in a newly conquered territory, or perhaps a sum of gold that allows you to buy property in your home region. This donative is supposed to be your ticket to a new life, a reward for your sacrifices. However, the land might be untamed wilderness, requiring immense labor to cultivate, or the money might not be enough to truly thrive. You quickly realize that even after serving Rome, the struggle for survival continues, just in a different form. The physical toll of your service is evident. Your body, once a finely honed instrument of war, now carries the aches of old wounds, the stiffness of joints, and the chronic fatigue that never quite goes away. Perhaps you limp from an old leg wound, or your hearing is dulled by years of shouting and the clang of battle. These are permanent reminders of the price you paid. You might even carry visible scars, badges of a brutal existence that both elicit respect and cause apprehension in those who haven't seen such horrors. You are a walking testament to the violent reality of Roman warfare. More challenging, perhaps, are the invisible wounds, the psychological scars. Sleep might still be elusive, haunted by nightmares of battle. Loud noises might make you jump, your hand instinctively reaching for a sword that isn't there. You might find it difficult to connect with civilians, who seem to live in a world of trivial concerns compared to the life and death stakes you faced daily. The camaraderie of the legion, forged in shared hardship, is replaced by a sense of isolation. No one truly understands what you've been through, except other veterans. Historians still debate the specific forms of trauma Roman veterans experienced and how society coped with it. But it's evident that many struggled to reintegrate, often suffering from what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress. You might find yourself gravitating towards other veterans, forming new bonds with those who share your experiences. These connections become a vital support network, a place where you can speak openly about the horrors you've witnessed without fear of judgment. You might gather in taverns, sharing grim jokes and war stories, finding solace in the shared understanding that only those who have faced death together can truly comprehend. This small community becomes your new legion, a brotherhood outside the formal structure of the army. Reintegrating into civilian society is a massive adjustment. The strict discipline of the legion, where every action was dictated, is replaced by the freedom and sometimes bewildering choices of civilian life. You're used to following orders, not making your own decisions. The rigid hierarchy and clear purpose of military life are gone. You might struggle to find meaningful work beyond farming your land or guarding. The fast pace and violence of warfare are replaced by the slow, often monotonous rhythm of agricultural life. You might feel a sense of aimlessness, a loss of purpose that only the legion could provide. An interesting, if often grim, detail about veteran life was the occasional use of veterans for colonization efforts. Instead of simply returning home, groups of veterans were sometimes settled in newly conquered or strategically important territories. This served a dual purpose, rewarding the veterans with land and establishing loyal Roman communities in new areas, helping to solidify Roman control. You might have been offered such an opportunity, trading your homeland for a new life on the frontier, a further extension of Rome's imperial reach even after your service was officially complete. This meant continuing to live in a militarized zone, forever tied to Rome's expansion. Your perspective on Rome itself has changed. You've seen its glory, yes, but you've also seen its brutal underbelly, the merciless conquest, the exploitation of conquered peoples, the casual indifference to human suffering. You're no longer just a naive recruit. You're a veteran, with a cynical understanding of power and the true cost of empire. You carry the weight of countless battles, the echoes of screams, and the knowledge of what you've been forced to do in Rome's name. As you finally settle, perhaps starting a family or simply tending your land, the memories of the legion never truly fade. They are woven into the fabric of your being, shaping who you are, how you perceive the world, and how you live your remaining years. You are a Roman veteran, a survivor of an unforgiving machine, and the brutal truth of your service will forever define you. The gentle sway of the fields, or the quiet murmur of a stream, may be peaceful, but they cannot entirely drown out the distant clang of swords, or the imagined shouts of battle that still resonate within your mind. You've lived through it all? From the raw recruit to the battle-hardened veteran, you've seen the Roman war machine up close, from the inside, and understood its brutal efficiency. Now, as your days as a legionary are long behind you, you begin to see the grander tapestry, the echoes of empire, the true cost of what you helped build. The lingering impact of Rome's relentless expansion reverberates through the lands you conquered and even through your own quiet life. Look around you. Even in your retirement, the very roads you might travel, those meticulously paved arteries stretching across the landscape, were built by legions like yours, often with the forced labor of conquered peoples. They were designed to move troops and supplies, to solidify Roman control, and to extract wealth from new provinces. These roads are physical manifestations of Roman power, connecting a vast and diverse empire under one iron heel. You see them now not just as paths, but as the sinews of an empire built on conquest and subjugation. The cities you helped conquer, or later pacify, now bear the unmistakable stamp of Roman civilization. Temples to Roman gods stand alongside, or have replaced, local shrines, Roman forums, aqueducts, and public baths rise where indigenous settlements once stood. Latin, the language you learned to bark orders in, has become the dominant tongue in many regions, slowly displacing local dialects. This isn't just cultural exchange, it's a form of cultural assimilation, a gradual erasure of unique identities under the guise of progress and order. You were a direct participant in this slow, relentless transformation. Consider the economic legacy of Roman conquest. The vast wealth that flowed into Rome from its provinces, extracted through taxation, tribute, and the spoils of war, fueled an unparalleled period of prosperity for the Roman elite. Grand villas, extravagant public spectacles, and the very stability of the Roman state were all built on the backs of conquered populations. You, the legionary, saw this wealth firsthand, sometimes even benefiting from it through your donative. But you also saw the source of that wealth, the exploited mines, the overworked farmlands, and the unending toil of slaves. The sheer scale of slavery that Roman conquest perpetuated casts a long, dark shadow. Millions of individuals were uprooted from their homes and forced into servitude, their lives utterly consumed by the demands of their Roman masters. This human cost is immense, a silent testament to the brutal efficiency of the Roman war machine. Their suffering, though often unseen and unheard in the grand histories, is an undeniable part of the empire's legacy, built on the systematic dehumanization of vast populations. Historians still debate whether Rome's expansion was primarily driven by strategic necessity or by an insatiable desire for wealth and power. While defensible borders and preventing barbarian incursions were often cited, the consistent pattern of absorbing resources and manpower from newly conquered territories suggests a deep economic imperative at play. You, as a former legionary, wouldn't have understood the high-level geopolitical debates, but you certainly understood the tangible gains: the gold, the land, the slaves, and the very real wealth that flowed back to Rome. Even the concept of peace, the Pax Romana, which Rome proudly proclaimed, was often a peace enforced by the sword. It was the absence of large-scale rebellion, maintained by garrisons of men like you, ever ready to crush any sign of defiance. This wasn't a peace born of mutual respect or shared understanding. It was a peace born of overwhelming force, a quiet terror that kept dissent firmly suppressed. You were an instrument of this imposed tranquility, and you saw the resentment simmering beneath the surface. The psychological impact on Rome itself is also an echo of empire. The constant exposure to warfare, the glorification of military prowess, and the normalization of brutal conquest seeped into the very fabric of Roman society. While it fostered resilience and discipline, it also cultivated a certain callousness, a desensitization to suffering, and an unquestioning belief in Rome's inherent right to rule. The brutal truths you learned on the battlefield, in a twisted way, mirrored the brutal truths that underpinned the empire's enduring power. As you reflect on your life, on the choices you made, and the path you walked, you understand that you were a vital, albeit small, part of something immense and terrifying. The brutal truth of Roman warfare wasn't just about the clash of swords or the roar of battle. It was about the slow, relentless grinding of cultures, the systematic exploitation of resources, and the profound human cost of an empire built on an unyielding will to dominate. The world you now inhabit, with its Roman roads and Roman laws, is a direct consequence of the violence you inflicted and endured. The distant sound of a passing wagon, or the rustle of leaves in the wind, might carry the faint, unsettling echo of all that came before.